universe, in its infinite wisdom and questionable sense of humor, had developed a fairly straightforward system for determining who got to sit at the big kids' table. It was called the dominance gradient, and it was exactly as subtle as it sounds, which is to say, not even remotely. The fundamental principle was beautifully simple. If you wanted respect, you needed to look like you could rip someone's spine out and use it as a back scratcher, preferably while maintaining eye contact and humming something intimidating. This wasn't metaphorical. The galaxy's apex predators had spent millions of years perfecting the art of looking absolutely terrifying. And they took it seriously the way some species take religion or tax evasion. Armor plating, mandatory. Weapons visible from 300 meters. Basic courtesy. A constant emission of threatening sounds, pheromones, or subsonic pulses that made nearby species question their life choices? Well, that was just good manners. The dominance gradient wasn't some philosophical concept debated in academic circles. It was measurable, quantifiable, and updated in real time across the galactic network. Every species had a ranking. Every individual could see exactly where they stood in the grand hierarchy of beings you shouldn't mess with unless you've updated your will recently. It was democracy for apex predators. Everyone got a vote, and the votes were counted in threat display intensity. The Zalkrim, for instance, occupied a comfortable position in the upper middle tier. 8-foot-tall insectoid warriors whose carapaces had evolved beyond mere chitin into what could only be described as biological battle armor. They secreted a metallic compound that hardened into articulated plates, complete with serrated edges and color-changing threat patterns. Evolution had essentially given them fashion-conscious plate mail, and they wore it with the confidence of creatures who'd never lost an argument because everyone else had run away screaming. Their threat display involved spreading their forearms wide, exposing the bioluminescent patterns across their thorax that pulsed in mathematically perfect sequences designed to trigger fear responses in every species with eyes. They'd also evolved the ability to produce a clicking sound that translated across species as, "I am considering violence, and I'm very good at it." Subtle? No. Effective? Absolutely. The Zalkrim hadn't fought a war in 3 centuries because everyone took one look at them and decided diplomacy sounded fantastic, actually. Then you had the Thornback clan, who'd looked at the concept of subtlety, laughed, and decided to go in the exact opposite direction. Massive reptilian beings whose evolutionary strategy appeared to have been, what if we were just a biological tank? They stood 12 feet tall when they weren't slouching, which they never did, because slouching implied you weren't confident. And the Thornbacks were confident the way. Black holes are massive. Their scales weren't just armor. They were layered plates of crystalline bone structure that could deflect most energy weapons and all common sense. The Thornback part of their name came from the ridge of spikes running down their spine, each one approximately the size of a human forearm and sharp enough to be considered a war crime in 17 jurisdictions. These spikes would extend when they were agitated, which was most of the time, creating a threat profile that looked like someone had crossbred a dinosaur with a medieval weapons catalog. They didn't so much walk as lumber with purpose, and their very presence made structural engineers nervous about load-bearing capacities. The Velshara occupied the elegant end of the murder spectrum. Feline-esque hunters who'd evolved on a world where stealth and precision were more valuable than raw strength. Though they'd kept plenty of that too, thank you very much. 7 feet of sleek muscle covered in fur that could shift colors to match their mood or environment, equipped with retractable claws made of a crystalline material that could slice through most standard armor like it was tissue paper with commitment issues. Their threat display was more psychological than visual. though the visual component of watching those claws extend while maintaining unblinking eye contact was fairly effective on its own. The Velshara had evolved a pheromone system that could induce varying levels of unease, from mildly concerned to existential dread with a side of panic. They considered it crude to rely solely on physical intimidation. Why break someone's body when you could break their confidence first? More sophisticated, more civilized, more likely to give your prey nightmares for years afterward. This was the galactic standard. This was how things worked. You evolved to look dangerous, you advertised that danger constantly, and everyone else respected your place in the hierarchy accordingly. Simple, logical, a system that had worked for millions of years across thousands of species. And then humans showed up and politely ignored the entire thing. The convergence market existed in neutral space, which was diplomatic speak for no single species wants to claim this area, because then they'd be responsible when the inevitable happens. It was a massive station, 3 kilometers across, designed by committee, which meant it had the aesthetic coherence of a fever dream and the practical functionality of a weapon designed by the lowest bidder. But it worked mostly. And it served as one of the primary trading hubs where species that might otherwise try to kill each other could conduct business while only threatening to kill each other. The architecture was a compromise between dozens of different species' needs, which meant everything was slightly wrong for everyone. Ceilings were high enough to accommodate the thornbacks, but that made smaller species feel like they were conducting business in an aircraft hangar. Corridors were wide enough for multiple Zalkrim to pass without triggering territorial responses. But this created sightlines that made ambush-evolved species deeply uncomfortable. The lighting was calibrated to a spectrum that every species could see, which meant it looked actively hostile to everyone. The market floor itself was a marvel of paranoid engineering. Reinforced deck plating rated for creatures weighing up to 15 tons. Emergency bulkheads every 30 meters that could seal off sections faster than you could say, incident report. Weapon scanners that were theoretically required but practically ignored because asking an apex predator to disarm was like asking water to stop being wet. Technically possible, but why would you even try? On this particular rotation, the market was hosting a healthy cross-section of the galaxy's predator elite. A Zalkrim war merchant delegation had claimed the northern sector, their armor gleaming under the harsh lighting, clicking among themselves about profit margins and the disappointing quality of modern prey species. 3 Thornback clan traders had positioned themselves near the central plaza, forcing traffic to flow around them the way rivers flow around mountains, naturally and with great respect for the obstruction. The Velshara hunting clan occupied the elevated platforms along the western wall, because of course they did. Height advantage, superior sight lines, and it let them look down on everyone else, both literally and metaphorically. Their color-shifting fur rippled through shades of confident crimson and satisfied silver as they watched the market's traffic below, occasionally releasing pheromone signals that made nearby prey species remember urgent business elsewhere. The prey species, merchants, traders, service providers, navigated this environment with the practiced efficiency of beings who'd learned that survival meant being useful, unobtrusive, and very, very aware of where the predators were at all times. They occupied the spaces between, the gaps in the hierarchy, conducting business while carefully avoiding eye contact with anything that might consider eye contact a challenge. This was the ecosystem. Predators displaying, prey avoiding, everyone understanding their role. Then the human walked in and somehow made the entire market feel smaller. No announcements, no grand entrance, no subsonic pulse of, "I have arrived and you should care about this." Just a human woman entering through the standard commercial airlock, completing the biometric scan with the bored efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, and walking into the market proper like she was entering a shopping center in a safe suburb rather than a trading station full of species that considered violence a legitimate form of self-expression. She was average. That was the word that came to mind, and it was somehow wrong in ways that were hard to articulate. Maybe 5.5 feet tall, though her posture made it hard to judge accurately. Standard human frame, bipedal, bilateral symmetry, the usual configuration. Her clothing was civilian grade, synthetic pants in a dark color, a jacket that looked comfortable rather than protective, boots that were clearly meant for walking rather than kicking through armored plating. No armor. This bore repeating because it was so fundamentally weird in this context. Every other predator in the market was wearing some form of protection, from the Zalkrim's biological plates to the Velshara's reinforced fur, to the Thornback's what if a mountain could file a lawsuit. She was wearing fabric. Normal, every day. I got this at a store fabric. No visible weapons. The Zalkrim had blades integrated into their forearms. The Velshara had claws that could open arteries. The Thornbacks had spikes that doubled as close combat weapons and fashion statements. She had hands. Just regular hands. 5 fingers each, no claws or additional joints or obvious modifications. Hands that looked like they'd be equally comfortable holding a coffee cup or a data pad. Her footsteps made no sound, not the artificially silent movement of a stealth predator that had a quality, a presence, a space where sound should be but wasn't. Just normal walking that happened to be quiet because humans had evolved to move efficiently rather than threateningly. No stomping, no deliberate impacts, no everyone within 50 meters should know I'm approaching announcement protocol. The Zalkrim noticed her first because they noticed everything. Evolutionary paranoia turned into a survival trait and then into a cultural identity. Kevnash, a senior war merchant with 80 cycles of combat experience, felt his threat assessment systems activate automatically. Small species, no apparent weapons, no armor, minimal threat profile. His logical mind filed her under prey species and prepared to ignore her. His evolutionary hindbrain, the part that had kept his ancestors alive through the nightmare ecosystems of their homeworld, started screaming. Something was wrong. She moved through the market with a purposeful calm that didn't match her apparent threat level. Prey species moved quickly through spaces like this, minimizing exposure time, keeping their heads down. Predator species moved with swagger, claiming space, advertising their presence. She moved like someone running errands, like the station full of beings that could kill her in multiple creative ways was roughly as concerning as a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. You seeing this? Kevnash clicked to his clutchmate, Zethril. The human? Prey species. Barely worth cataloging. Then why is she walking like that? Like what? Like she belongs here. Zethril's sensors swept over the human, running through standard threat assessment protocols. Nothing registered. No concealed weapons, no augmentations, no enhanced musculature or skeletal reinforcement. The readout came back almost insulting. Standard carbon-based life form, operating within normal parameters for her species, heart rate and breathing steady, despite being surrounded by creatures that outmassed her 3-to-1 at minimum. The human stopped at a merchant stall selling advanced sensor packages. Military-grade equipment that could detect everything from heartbeats through walls to specific molecular compositions at range. The vendor, a 6-armed Quellan, who'd learned that neutrality and good prices kept you alive longer than choosing sides. watched her with the cautious interest of someone whose survival instincts were finely calibrated. "Can I help you?" The Quellen's translator rendered his multi-harmonic speech into flat standard trade language. "I'm looking for wide-spectrum detection arrays, something that can handle multiple simultaneous inputs without processing lag. You carry the Vexthor brand?" The Quellon blinked 3 of his eyes in surprise. Vexthor was top-tier military equipment, expensive enough to make most private buyers reconsider their life choices. Yes, but those require extensive calibration and... I've worked with the Mark 7 series before. Same basic interface protocol, right? Or did they update the firmware again? She said it conversationally, like she was discussing weather patterns rather than military-grade sensor technology that most species needed specialized training to operate. Kevinash had moved closer, his clicking pattern shifting to the frequency that indicated focused attention. Other Zalkrim noticed and tuned in. The Velshara on their elevated platforms paused their conversation. Even the Thornbacks, who generally ignored anything that couldn't punch through their armor, shifted their bulk slightly for better viewing angles. "Planning some surveillance work?" Kevnash asked, letting his armor's bioluminescent patterns cycle into active threat display mode. The mathematical precision of the pulses was designed to trigger instinctive unease in species with pattern recognition capabilities, which was most of them. The human turned to face him, slowly, not the jerky, startled response of prey recognizing danger, just turning, taking her time, like she had all day and wasn't particularly concerned about how she spent it. "Just upgrades," she said. Her voice was pleasant, conversational, completely at odds with the situation. "My current setup is getting dated. You know how it is. Technology evolves. You've got to keep up or get left behind." Kevinash leaned in, spreading his arms in the classic Zalkrim dominance posture. 8 feet of biological battle armor, bioluminescent patterns pulsing at 72 cycles per minute, the threshold for committed aggression. Serrated edges catching the light in ways that millions of years of evolution had optimized for maximum. "Maybe you should be scared, Impact. At this range, most species, predator or prey, showed some physiological response. Elevated heart rate, defensive posture, the basic acknowledgement that they were in a situation with potentially violent consequences." She looked at him the way an engineer might examine a particularly interesting mechanism. Curious, but not concerned. "Zalkrim wore merchant configuration armor," she observed, her tone shifting into something almost academic. "The Mark 9 biosynthesis variant, if I'm not mistaken. You've got good color saturation on your threat patterns. Means your metalloproteins are processing efficiently. Probably means you maintain a high-quality diet. Good for you." The market went quiet. Not the dramatic, everyone stops talking quiet of entertainment media. Just a gradual reduction in ambient noise as conversations paused, as predators tuned their attention to what was happening, as prey species recognized the shift in atmosphere and prepared to scatter. "The serrated edges along your ventral plating are well maintained," she continued, seemingly oblivious to, or completely unconcerned about, the fact that she was anatomically analyzing a being who could literally tear her apart. "No visible damage, good edge retention. You take care of your armor, smart. I notice your right secondary arm has a slight tremor, though. Micro muscle fatigue, probably from repetitive stress. Old injury? Combat damage that healed, but not perfectly?" Kevnash had stopped breathing. This was physiologically challenging for a Zalkrim in active threat display mode, but his autonomous nervous system had apparently decided that continuing to respire was less important than processing what was happening. Your threat display patterns are pulsing at 72 cycles per minute, which in Zalcrim physiology indicates committed aggression state. But your actual stance is defensive, weight distributed to enable rapid backward movement rather than forward strike, which means you're displaying aggression you don't intend to follow through on. You're testing, assessing, which is smart because starting fights without knowing what you're fighting is how warriors become cautionary tales. She smiled. It wasn't threatening. Humans didn't have the biological equipment for proper threat displays, no fangs, no bioluminescence, no impressive mandibles. Just a facial expression that indicated positive emotion. Somehow, it was worse than any snarl or display in the market. "I'm Zalcrim," Kevnash said, and his translator couldn't quite hide the uncertainty in his harmonics. "We're apex predators. We are very good at what you do," she finished. "I'm not disputing that. Your species has an impressive combat record. 3 centuries of successful dominance through threat display efficiency alone. That's remarkable. Shows sophistication. Why fight when you can convince everyone that fighting you would be a terrible idea?" Zethriel had approached, along with 2 other Zalcrim from their merchant delegation. The Velshara had shifted to their hunting posture. Subtle, but everyone who knew what to look for could see it. The Thornbacks had gone completely still, which involved stopping approximately 36 tons of combined mass, with the sudden attention of something that usually only focused on things worth eating or destroying. "You seem to know a lot about us," Zethriel clicked, his patterns deliberately neutral, the Zalcrim equivalent of keeping your hands visible. "I read," she said simply. "Your species has extensive documentation available through the galactic database. Social structures, combat techniques, biological specifications. It's all there if you look for it." She turned back to the Quellan merchant, who was watching the interaction with all 6 eyes, each probably calculating the probability of his stall becoming collateral damage. "So, the Vex Thor Mark 7. Do you have it in stock, or would you need to order it?" "I have it. In stock, yes." The Quellan was moving on autopilot now, reaching for his inventory manifest with 2 arms, while the other 4 remained very carefully neutral. "Full calibration package included, and I'll throw in the extended warranty. No charge, because I value customer satisfaction. Very much. Extremely." One of the Velshara, they hunted in coordinated packs, which meant they communicated constantly through pheromones and micro-expressions, descended from her elevated position with the liquid grace that made their species so effective at murder. Velanth, a clan leader with 2 decades of hunting experience and the scars to prove she'd survived what most didn't. "Human," she purred, her translator rendering the subsonic rumble into words. "You walk among predators with no fear, foolish or confident." The human glanced at her, taking in the 7 feet of weaponized feline evolution, the claws that had extended just slightly in what was definitely meant to be intimidating. The color shift patterns playing across her fur that indicated heightened interest, the Velshara version of locking onto a target. "Neither, really," the human said. "Just shopping. Though, since you mention it, I've been reading about Velshara pack dynamics. Fascinating structure. The way you coordinate hunting strategies through pheromone communication is remarkably efficient. Much more sophisticated than simple vocal coordination." Velanth's pupils dilated. Surprise response, visible even to non-Velshara observers. The clan structure based on hunting success rather than simple dominance combat is interesting too, the human continued. "It means your leadership is actually meritocratic, which probably contributes to your species' effectiveness. Leaders who are leaders because they're actually good at leading, rather than just good at fighting. Smart system. Reduces internal conflict, maximizes group cohesion. She paused, her expression thoughtful. Though I imagine it creates succession challenges. What happens when a successful hunt leader gets old? The transition to advisory roles must be culturally complex, especially for a species that defines status through active capability. Valanth's fur had gone through 3 different color patterns in rapid succession, an emotional response that her conscious control couldn't fully suppress. You have studied Velshara social structures. Like I said, I read. Your species has documented its own history extensively. The Treaty of Velinor from 37 cycles ago is particularly interesting. The way 3 clans resolved territorial disputes by essentially creating a shared hunting ground and profit distribution system. Elegant solution. Turned competitors into partners without anyone losing face. The human accepted her purchase from the Quelon, who was moving with the desperate efficiency of someone who wanted this interaction to end before it escalated into the kind of incident that required filing insurance claims. Actually, she said, glancing at Valanth with what appeared to be genuine interest. I heard your clan was having some territorial negotiation challenges with the Kelshara clan. Overlapping hunting zones near the Vestrian sector? Valanth's claws extended fully now, not in threat, but in pure shock response. How do you... Public record. Your clan filed a grievance with the Convergence Trade Authority 6 cycles ago. It's in the database. I was curious about the outcome, but there hasn't been an update. Did you resolve it? We are still negotiating. The Kelshara are being difficult about access schedules. Yes, Valanth admitted, and her fur colors shifted to patterns that indicated confusion and something that might have been respect. They claim historical precedent, but the sector was jointly accessible until the Reformation, which means neither clan has exclusive historical claim. The human finished. Sounds like you need a mediator. Has anyone suggested looking at the Velinor Treaty framework? It addressed almost the exact same situation. Could probably adapt the profit sharing and access rotation protocols with minimal modification. Valanth stared at her. All the Velshara were staring now, their sophisticated predator instincts trying to process what was happening and coming up with error messages. Because the human wasn't threatening them, wasn't challenging them, was offering helpful advice about clan politics like they were colleagues discussing a project problem. And she'd done it while demonstrating that she understood Velshara social structure better than most Velshara did. Across the market, a thornback named Greth Kor watched the scene with the patient attention of something that had learned the hard way that the universe was full of surprises. And the survivors were the ones who paid attention to the surprising things. He'd fought in the border wars, back when fighting still happened regularly. And he'd learned something that kept him alive when more aggressive warriors died. The most dangerous opponent was the one who didn't match your threat model. The human didn't match anyone's threat model. She was small, unarmored, unarmed. By every logical assessment, she should be prey, easy prey. The kind of target that predators saw as a quick meal or a confidence boost, or just something to intimidate for entertainment. But she'd just anatomically analyzed a Zalkrim war merchant and socially counseled a Velshara clan leader. And she'd done both while completing a shopping transaction for military-grade sensor equipment. Greth Kor had seen apex predators before. He was one. He'd fought others. He knew what they looked like, how they moved, how they claimed space and advertised danger. This human didn't look like an apex predator. She looked like something worse. She looked like something that had decided predators weren't threats, just interesting organisms to be understood, cataloged, and worked around. The human completed her purchase. The Quelon had practically thrown in free shipping and a lifetime warranty, and continued through the market. She stopped at a protein supplement vendor, discussed amino acid profiles with the kind of casual expertise that suggested she understood nutrition at the molecular level. She browsed a data repository stall, comparing information storage formats with technical precision. She bought food, actual food, preparing for meals like a normal person, and chatted with the vendor about preservation methods. She was just shopping, living her life, conducting normal business in a completely normal way. And every predator in the market moved aside. Not obviously, not with the overt fear response of prey fleeing a hunter. But they moved, created space, gave her room. The Zalkrim delegation found urgent business reviewing their manifests. The Velshara pack discovered that the far side of the market had better lighting for their photosensitive vision. The Thornbacks remembered they needed to check structural specifications on their docked vessels. The prey species noticed. A Quelon merchant, watching the human receive a path that cleared naturally wherever she walked, made a chittering sound that his species used to indicate vindicated satisfaction. "See that?" he said to his assistant, a younger Quelon still learning the trade. "That's a human. That's what actually being Apex looks like. But she has no armor, no weapons, no..." "Exactly. She doesn't need them. You know why?" The younger Quelon shook his head, all six eyes focused on his mentor. "Because by the time you realize you should be scared, she's already known everything about you for the past 10 minutes. Your weaknesses, your patterns, your social structure, your clan politics, your biological vulnerabilities. Humans don't fight. They understand. And understanding is more dangerous than any weapon." The human paused at a data terminal, accessing public records with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times. Around her, the market's flow adjusted automatically, traffic patterns shifting like water around a stone, creating space without conscious thought. Kevinash watched from his position near his stall. His threat display patterns had long since shut down, his aggressive posture replaced with something closer to watchful respect. "Zethril." "Yes?" "Remind me to update our threat assessment protocols." "To include what?" "Anything that demonstrates comprehensive understanding of our species without having fought us. If something knows us that well without needing to test it in combat, it's learned through observation. And if it learned through observation, it's been watching us." Zethril finished. "Studying us, cataloging us. Which means it's been treating us like prey," Kevinash said quietly. "We just didn't notice because we were too busy displaying." The human finished her market transactions. She'd bought supplies, equipment, food, and somehow left every vendor feeling like they'd gotten the better end of the deal while simultaneously being more terrified than they'd ever been. She headed toward the exit corridors, her path remaining mysteriously clear through the crowded market. Velanth, still processing her conversation, watched the human leave with her clan gathered around her. She just offered us a solution to our territorial dispute, while demonstrating she knew more about our clan than most Velshara. Another clan member added, "Without threatening us once." "That's what makes it terrifying," Velanth said softly. "She didn't need to threaten us. She'd already assessed us, understood us, and decided we weren't worth threatening. We weren't challenges. We were just beings in her environment to be understood and worked around." Grethkor, watching from his position, made a rumbling sound that his species used to indicate philosophical satisfaction. His younger clanmate looked at him questioningly. "Lesson learned today," Grethkor said. "The galaxy's predators spend their time trying to look dangerous. We evolve armor, weapons, threat displays. We advertise our lethality. We compete to be the most visible apex. And humans? Humans don't advertise. They observe. They learn. They understand. And by the time you realize they're the apex predator, they've already cataloged 17 ways to kill you and decided you're not worth the effort. That's horrifying." "That's humanity," Grethkor corrected. "They evolved on a death world where they weren't the strongest, fastest, or most armored. So they became the smartest, the most persistent, the best at pattern recognition. They hunted prey by following it until it collapsed from exhaustion. They killed predators by understanding them better than the predators understood themselves." He watched the human ship undock from the station through the observation ports, its drives leaving a standard ion trail. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening, nothing advertising danger. "We spent millions of years evolving to look dangerous," Grethkor continued. "Humans spent their evolution learning how to kill things that looked dangerous. That's why they don't need armor or weapons or threat displays. By the time they need those things, they've already lost. And humans don't plan on losing." The market gradually returned to normal. Predators resumed their displays, their posturing, their careful maintenance of the dominance gradient. The prey species went back to their careful navigation of the space between, surviving by being useful and unthreatening. But something had changed. A crack had appeared in the certainty of the hierarchy. Every predator in that market had been assessed by something higher on the food chain, and they'd all felt it. That primal recognition that bypassed conscious thought and went straight to the oldest parts of their brains, the parts that remembered when their ancestors were prey before they evolved armor and weapons and threat displays. The parts that remembered what it felt like to be studied by something patient. The human, whose name was carefully not included in any official reports because sometimes plausible deniability was the better part of valor, was already en route to her next destination. Another station, another market, another collection of predators who thought their armor and displays made them safe. They'd learn the same lesson everyone else learned eventually. In a galaxy full of creatures trying very hard to look dangerous, the real apex predator was the one who didn't bother. Because armor could be penetrated, weapons could be countered, threat displays could be ignored. But understanding, knowledge, the ability to look at a being and know, truly know, everything from their biological vulnerabilities to their social structures to their current clan disputes, you couldn't armor against that. You couldn't intimidate it. You couldn't even see it coming until it was already over. The dominance gradient had operated for millions of years on a simple principle. The most dangerous predator was the one who looked most dangerous. It was a system built on advertising, on display, on the visible projection of lethality. Then humanity joined the galactic community and politely demonstrated that the most dangerous predator was the one who made you feel safe right up until you realized you'd been prey all along. And the really terrifying part, the thing that kept predators awake during their rest cycles, the thought that crawled through their hindbrain like ice water, was that humans did this casually, reflexively, the way some species breathed or blinked. They didn't study you because you were a threat. They studied you because that's what humans did. They observed. They learned. They understood. And somewhere in a data file, on a ship heading to another station, was a human's casual assessment of every predator in the convergence market. Their strengths, weaknesses, social structures, biological vulnerabilities, current disputes, and probable response patterns. Not because she planned to fight them, just because she'd noticed. The